Welcome back to Morning Joe. It is Wednesday, February 20th. Mike Marnicle is still with us. And joining the conversation, we have former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He is the author of the new book, The Threat: How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump.
So I just want to get something, just make sure that my past tweets have been accurate. When I talk about the Democratic conspiracy at the FBI and in Washington, and then I list the 11 or 12 Republicans. You were a lifelong Republican before all this, right?
I was.
Like me? Yeah.
I was. I voted for Republican presidents in every election until 2016.
Yeah, same here. What I find, there's so much that's come out. It's been so fascinating, so surprising. But what shocks me the most is, and I shouldn't be shocked anymore, is that Mitch McConnell and the Gang of Eight were told a long time ago that you had concerns, not only the FBI and you had concerns about Donald Trump's ties to Russia, but that you were investigating him. What can you tell us about that?
That's right. So, you know, an important part of that very dramatic step of initiating investigation, certainly getting that recommendation from my team, considering it very closely, approving it for the reasons that I've detailed. And we had observable facts that indicated that a threat to national security may exist and a crime may have been committed. Talked that through with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod
Can I stop you right there? What was the most compelling? Because there's so many things. I mean, for us, we always talk about when he was bragging about firing Comey to Sergei Lavrov in the White House with, you know, no American reporters in there, and the U.S. the Russian ambassador. What was the tipping point for the FBI where they said this is something we have to look into? If we don't, then we won't be doing our job?
Well, Joe, that concern, those concerns have been building as our investigation had gone forward, right? We've been through a series of really strange and troubling interactions between the president and Jim Comey. And then, of course, there's that watershed moment where he asks Jim Comey to drop the Michael Flynn case, which is, of course, something we would never do. In the wake of that ask, we were all stepping back and realizing, like, this is not just inexperience talking. This is not just a lack of knowledge about how the FBI works and how the Department of Justice, where we fit in this town. This was an actual attempt to kind of put a thumb on the scales and impact the work that we were doing for their benefit.
All right.
Then, of course, he fires the director.
Right. So going back to the initial question, so that was the triggering point in the investigation. When you went and talked to the Gang of Eight, when you talked to Mitch McConnell, when you talked to Devin Nunes, any concerns from Nunes, Burr, Ryan, or McConnell, the Republicans there?
No concerns.
Did they say any? You're doing what? You're investigating the president?
No pushback whatsoever. You know, I walked through a fairly detailed brief, which I won't share the details of here, of course. Right. There was resignation at the table. There were a few nodding heads.
But you were specific. We are investigating the President of the United States because we are concerned that there may be something amiss regarding his relationship with Russia.
I was perfectly clear of that point.
On that point?
Yeah.
Perfectly clear of that point. Any responses from any of them, the four Republicans,
and what
that you can tell us here?
Yeah, there was not a discussion after my presentation.
Did you get a call after from one of those four members, from Devin Nunes, from Mitch McConnell, going, because, my God, I would. I'd say, okay, hey, listen, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Hey, what are you talking about, McCabe? Yeah. Did they call you and ask you about the investigation?
No call, no questions. I mean, look, the basis upon which we made that decision was perfectly clear. We were in possession of facts that made it abundantly clear that we had an articulable basis to believe that that threat might exist. And under those circumstances, the FBI is obligated to open a case. If we don't open a case because the subject happens to be the President of the United States, we're not doing our job. We've been undermined and motivated by politics. That was not the case here. We went forward, made that tough decision, announced it to the Deputy Attorney General and Congress in the way we're supposed to, and then we moved forward.
Can you tell us what the facts were that led you to believe that there should be an investigation?
I can tell you,
elements?
Sure. So some of those things that were adding to that conclusion were, at the very first mark, the president had made it perfectly clear publicly, as you've said, Joe, that he did not like what we were doing. He'd been undermining the case, referring to it as a hoax, just constantly communicating through his Twitter feed that he was not happy with the investigation we were pursuing. He then talks to Director Comey about dropping the Flynn case, which was concerning to us. He repeatedly pressed Director Comey.
By the way, let me ask you, how long were you in the FBI? How long
21
were you?
years.
20 years.
21
In 21 years, did you ever have a public official ask you to drop a case for somebody that worked on their staff, worked closely with them?
Not once, not ever in 21 years.
Anybody in the FBI that you know come to you and go, well, you know, this reminds me of '86 when the mayor of why don't we just say Providence, Rhode Island? Is that what that? I mean, that's hitting a pretty big bullseye. The mayor of Providence, Rhode Island asked me to drop a case. Anytime. By the way, I don't know who the mayor was.
Yeah, no.
In '86 in Providence, Rhode Island. So I apologize if it were you. Was it Buddy?
Yeah.
Okay, then I feel okay. Okay. So anyway, had anybody in the FBI ever had a public official ever pressure them to drop a case, an investigation of somebody that worked under them?
Look, I can't speak for everyone.
No, did you hear anybody telling you that?
But in my experience across 21 years, serving in this field office right in New York City, serving at headquarters, running the Washington field office, I've had a lot of exposure to public corruption cases over the years. I had never seen or heard anything quite like this.
Mike?
Okay.
Could you help us out with the timeline? Could you tell us when the Russian intervention into our elections, when did it first become apparent to the FBI that you had to open an investigation into that aspect?
So we opened the initial Russian cases in, I don't hold me to a specific date, but end of July in 2016.
When did Donald J. Trump intersect with that investigation?
Well, the investigation itself was focused on whether or not the Trump campaign may have had an inappropriate relationship or interactions with the Russian government. So this was a topic that we debated hotly amongst the investigative team, whether or not we were actually investigating the president. We weren't, of course, until we opened the case in May. But there were some on our team who felt that the mere fact that we were investigating the campaign which he was in charge of, brought us very close to having to say, essentially, that he was under investigation. Of course, he wasn't until May, but we were pretty close.
On January 20th, he becomes president of the United States.
That's right.
2017. He then gets the full presidential briefing. Does he, at that point in time, become aware that he is on the fringes, or his campaign is on the fringes of an FBI investigation?
He was aware of our concerns about Russian involvement in, not just Russian involvement in the election, but Russian support to what we in the intelligence community confidently believe was support to his campaign, particularly when we briefed him on the intelligence community assessment. That took place on January 6th. So before he was actually inaugurated.
Were you participating in that briefing?
I was not. Director Comey did that briefing.
When did you first participate face-to-face with Donald J. Trump?
I did not sit down face-to-face with the president until the evening of Jim Comey's firing.
And we now are all fairly familiar with the firing, the aftermath of the firing. And at this point in time, given everything that you know, everything that you've said, everything that you've written, would you, as a private attorney or a government attorney, be confident in taking an indictment for obstruction of justice on Donald J. Trump to a grand jury?
You know, that's a very kind of a loaded question for me, particularly coming out of my previous position. What I can tell you, Mike, is this. I was confident in May of 2017 that we had ample facts to indicate that the president may have committed obstruction of justice. That's the point that the FBI is in, right? We just decide when and what we investigate. And we do it not based on politics, not because we like the guy or we don't like the guy or we think this case would be interesting or fun. We do it because of the facts we have at the time. And at that time, it was abundantly clear to me that we had enough facts to indicate that that crime may have been committed.
Now, you said May twice. That's sort of a general standard. The crime may have been committed. Enough that you would feel confident to have a U.S. attorney
Absolutely.
pursue it?
Absolutely.
You were asked yesterday on ABC whether or not you believe Russians ordered President Trump to fire then FBI Director James Comey, and your response was, quote, "We don't know." Does that mean you leave open the possibility that the President of the United States was taking direction from Russia?
Absolutely. That's the possibility that exists in a counterintelligence investigation.
Do you believe, as some have suggested, that the President of the United States is a Russian asset?
You know, I can't sit here, Willie, and tell you that I believe that. What I can tell you is that I know we had good reason to open that investigation, and I'm quite confident that Director Mueller and his team will get to the bottom of that.
And given all you know, and now you've stepped outside and you've written this book, you've put a lot of it in the book. What's your best explanation for why President Trump has seemed again and again and again to lean toward the Russians, to defend Vladimir Putin in cases when no one else would?
I wish I could explain that for you this morning, right? That's something that I think anyone either involved in this investigation or simply watching the results of what Director Mueller is doing, sits back and scratches their head over day to day. The facts are, it doesn't take a surreptitious recording. It doesn't take extreme investigative techniques. All you have to do is watch the president, watch what he does, listen to what he says, and you can't help but escape those questions.
Broadly, you would say it's not a coincidence that the president is defending Russia and defending Putin.
It seems hard to imagine it's a coincidence. I think more importantly, we've never seen this before.
What's your best explanation for the president's private conversations with Putin with, I believe, no note taker, with translators and nothing else?
Yeah, I can't possibly explain that. It is a complete departure from the processes that I'm familiar with.
Okay, so 3 questions all related to the same thing. What mistakes do you think you made in your role in investigating Trump? What mistakes do you think Jim Comey made, and what about the FBI overall?
Wow, that's a big question.
Let's start with you.
Yeah, sure.
And not just the investigation of Donald Trump. What mistakes did you make over the past 2 years? What do you look back and say, man, I'd like to get a chance to get a do-over on that one?
No.
You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the decisions that Jim and I and the team went through, going back all the way to the Clinton email case into our investigation of Russia. And there were some momentous decisions that we made, some that may have had an impact on electoral politics far beyond anything that we ever intended. I'm pretty candid in the book about rethinking our decision even to announce our investigative results in the beginning of July.
I was going to ask about that. That was such a departure from precedent. Did Jim Comey make a mistake while not indicting, saying that we're not going to indict Hillary Clinton, but basically then holding a press conference and indicting her politically?
You know, Joe, I think in retrospect, now I supported Jim's decision to make that announcement at the time.
Was there anybody telling him not to do that?
No, there wasn't.
It was such a departure.
It was.
Is it not strange that there was nobody around Jim Comey saying, Mr. Director, we just don't do this. You either indict or you don't indict, and then go away.
I mean, Joe, we had those conversations. We were aware of the departure of precedent, but we banked very heavily and we were incredibly confident in Jim's ability as a communicator. I think we were overconfident. I think we put too much stock in our hope and our belief that Jim could communicate to people not just the extensive investigation that we had done.
Wasn't he grandstanding?
Why it was the correct
I mean, Democrats, I think, fairly say that he was grandstanding.
I wouldn't call it that. I wouldn't call it that. We were in a position where we felt it was essential to explain to people what we had done, what we had concluded, and what we thought about.
Was it done in part because you and Jim Comey and the FBI, like everybody else in the media except for 2 or 3 people, thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election and everybody wanted their hands clean when she did? So
absolutely
you wouldn't be having hearings 9 months into the Clinton administration on why you all weren't more aggressive with Hillary Clinton?
Absolutely not. No. It was done because we had received this investigation in an incredibly public way.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. If you could give advice to future FBI directors, would you tell them, when you're thinking about holding a press conference after you decide not to indict a public official, don't do it?
I think I would tell that future FBI director that precedent is important for good reason. And even in those moments when you are so confident and you have the you're trying to do the right thing. You feel like that departure from precedent, you have the ability and the confidence in your communicator, in the righteousness of your cause, in the work that you've done. And that's all great. That idea of precedent should weigh very heavily.
Keep your head
on your
down.
mind.
Keep your head down, do your job. Okay, let me ask you about the letter 10 days before the election. Which again, this is one of the most bizarre things when I hear about these deep state conspiracies against Donald Trump.
Right.
The quote, deep state elected Donald Trump. And if you talk to Donald Trump during that time, he would tell you that letter actually gave him a chance to win the presidency. What regrets do you or Jim Comey have about that letter that you can speak to on Jim Comey's
Sure,
part?
and I can't speak for Jim.
Okay, so
and
for
I think
you,
Jim has been pretty clear about how he feels
Do you
about it.
regret that letter was sent 10 days before the election?
I didn't agree with the decision to send that letter at the time. Unfortunately, it wasn't a decision I had the opportunity to participate in because
Right.
of all the issues that were swirling around me as a result of the Wall Street Journal reporting and this idea that I would recuse from the case.
Right.
So Jim told me he didn't want me to participate in that discussion and in that decision.
Why's that?
I'm sorry?
Why? Why did he not want you to participate?
Because again, I can't speak for Jim. I don't want to say what is his mind and what may or may not have been circulating through his mind. But
can you tell us who he consulted with? We always criticize Donald Trump for not consulting with more people before he makes momentous decisions. Can you tell me, who did Jim Comey, based on your best knowledge, who was he consulting with before he sent out that letter that swung the election to Donald Trump?
Well, Joe, I don't know because I wasn't there. But my
Yeah.
understanding is it was the same members of the team that had been working the issue right through the fall.
So now on a personal level, you talked about the Wall Street Journal reporting. Talk about the decision to leak the information on the Clinton Foundation. Again, deep state actor Andrew McCabe leaked something that I remember on this show. We said, okay, this really matters. This is really going to be damaging to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Again, the deep state working for Donald Trump, which is what's so bizarre about what infects the minds of people like Devin Nunes. Talk about the leak. It happens.
Yeah.
Public figures do it all the time. The FBI does it all the time. The CIA does it all the time. Take us into your thought process. Why did you leak that information, and why did you not tell the truth about it to investigators later?
Yeah, so Joe, I'm going to correct you on a couple things here. First is, just to start out, I am limited in what I can discuss with you about the Wall Street Journal articles and everything that came from them, because I am still, to this day, still caught up in legal issues from those events and everything that's.
All right, so what can you tell us about
But
that?
I will tell you this, Joe. When I served as deputy director, I was one of 2 people in the FBI who had the authority by FBI policy to interact with the media and to decide what information, as an organization, we shared with the media. So my activities, my involvement, transacting day to day on numerous media requests
Right.
all across the spectrum, right? That is not activity that any right-thinking, well-informed person would characterize as leaking.
Who was the other person? Comey?
The director.
You and Comey. So you don't consider your conversations with the Wall Street Journal to be leaking?
I don't consider any of the authorized disseminations of information that I was involved in over the course of my term as deputy to be leaks. They are not leaks.
So when we
They are
read
authorized.
when we read the book, we'll hear we'll read about the decisions leading up to that. And did Director Comey know that you were talking to the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, I cannot go into. I would love, Joe, to sit here
Right.
with take out that report, lay it open on the table, and go through point by point how I disagree with all of the conclusions in that IG report. And I will tell you this: I at no time ever intentionally misled Director Comey, the Inspector General, or the FBI inspectors investigating another media issue. The fact is that report, and I have been reading investigative reports for 21 years, is not the product of any investigation that I'm
Do
familiar
you think you were
with.
railroaded?
I think that it is abundantly.
Were people trying to please the president and the conclusions they reached?
There's no question what conclusion the president desired from that investigation. He made it clear in his own Twitter account, and the IG delivered the result that he was demanding. Do I know that there was a direction? I can't say that today, but I hope that we get to that point with the civil lawsuit I'll be filing.
Do you think when history is written, when the report is laid bare, that you will be vindicated and the IG questions will then turn to the IG's decision?
I do.
Okay.
Should they be investigated? Should the IG be investigated?
That's a really good question. they are the overseers, right? That's where oversight of the FBI and the department comes from. It's less clear who oversees the overseers.
All right.
That's probably a responsibility that falls back to Congress. I don't think Congress has distinguished itself in terms of oversight in the last 2 years. We'll see what happens going forward.
All right, we're going to have more with Andrew McCabe next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.